Hey y'all, from Spindle Mountain Mercantile. I am Heather. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Y'all, it is March in the South. Do you know what that means? And no, I'm not talking about basketball. I'm talking about growing weeds in my whiskey barrel. No, I'm talking about these little tiny baby green leaves on my lavender plant. Yay! Now, I don't have enough to make anything with those yet, but I went to Dollar Tree, Dollar General, and Hobby Lobby, and I bought some stems of fake lavender, and we're going to make stuff with that today. Project number 1. I'm starting off with this thrifted frame, and I want to show you how difficult I made removing the back. I didn't need to use all of these different tools. I used a screwdriver, I used a hammer, I used pliers, needle nose pliers, and we have the most awesome tool that's like an all-in-one. But first, I got to tell you about that bandage. I didn't mean to leave that on. I didn't even think about it until I was editing. I don't want you guys to worry. I just had to have a procedure in my shoulder, and they had to draw some blood. I'm not healing like I'm supposed to be, so they're ruling out some stuff. They stuck a huge needle in my shoulder, and that was fun. Anyway, back to crafting. All the way from Oregon, we brought this tool that we had. It's called fencing pliers. We got ours at a farm store, but you can get it at a hardware store. I'm going to leave a link in the description for one at Amazon. It's basically a rancher's Swiss Army tool. You can use it for so many things, but you can grab something with those pinchers and then roll it back on that curved part of the head, and it just pops it right out. Moving right along to clay. I usually use IOD's air dry clay. It's the best I've ever used, but for this I'm using cheap clay. This is the kind that you throw on a wheel, and I got this 10-pound box from Amazon, but you can go to Dollar General and get cheap clay, and there's other places too. But I want this to look old, cracked, and chippy, so I am using the cheapest clay I can find, and I'm using it in Iron Orchid Designs Trimmings for Mold. I usually put one piece of clay in a mold because that helps it not crack, but I cannot stress to you enough how much I want this to look old, so I'm not doing that. I'm using lots of little pieces, and later on I don't even fill in the whole mold. Brushing cornstarch in your mold helps it release the clay, but I didn't even do that because it'll break apart more. Are you getting what I'm saying? Are you picking up what I'm laying down? My sweet husband would say, "Are you gathering what I'm palaverating out of my pie hole?" I want this to look old. When I had the mold filled all the way, I used this scraper tool I got at Dollar Tree. It comes in a set of like 3 or 4 for $1.25. And I just went different ways to figure out. Sometimes I scrape it across and sometimes I pull it back. And it just depends on what the clay is and how deep your mold is to get a smooth surface. It doesn't have to be really smooth. And I'm okay if some of it comes out because you know why, right? Old. You can use your fingers for this part too, and when I'm done getting all the extra clay off, I just turn it over and I pull the mold back, and gravity and my fingers help me pull out the pieces of clay. I'm cutting this piece into 3 slices that are each just a little bit wider than my frame, and then I will start attaching them with Tite Bond Quick and Thick. I buy this on Amazon, and I will leave a link for it too. I'm putting it right on the frame, and then I'm putting the molds on top of it and just using a light, even pressure to make sure that it's pushed down all into where the frame has maybe a little bit different surface or has some ridges. And then I'm going to make sure my razor knife is long enough, and I'll slide it right next to the side of the frame so that the outside part of the mold is smooth, and the inside I'm just going to leave it alone. I'm going to keep adding clay, and I'll piece in the little sections where there's maybe too big of a gap until I get to the corners, and then I overlap it. My subscribers are probably getting used to the fact that I like a mitered edge. That's when you make the edge a slanted section where the two sides meet together. And to do that, you just cut straight through both pieces. You lift up the one side and pull out the scrap, and then you lay it back down. And voila, the two sides meet together perfectly. If you don't want a crack in that area, use some Tite Bond Quick and Thick and fill in the gap when you're done. You can also wait until it's dry and add clay the next day, but remember, we're going for old, so I did not do that. I realized a better way to make the molds was to just do 2 strips at a time because that inside strip had a flat edge on both sides. I want the outside edge of the frame to be straight and flat, but where the molds go around the inside part of the frame, I want them to be uneven, but not like uneven like I cut it, uneven like the edge of the mold where the petals and the leaves and the flowers are. When I had covered all 4 sides of the frame, I went back and just picked up the little bits and pieces of flowers that still look complete, and I added them to some of the sections that maybe I thought were a little bit too sparse. Then I used a damp towel to wipe up the excess glue. After everything was cleaned up, I went around the frame with my hands and just used gentle pressure to make sure everything was adhered on all 4 sides. Then I took it outside, and before it dried, I spray painted everything gold, including my hand. For real, look at that. And that inspired me to think I could start a new career. I could go to LA and hang out at the Santa Monica Pier. I could be one of those statues that when people sit down next to them, they scare them because they don't know they're a real person. Except I wouldn't scare people. I would just pull out E6000 and popsicle sticks and I would start crafting with them. I think I would get a lot more tips that way, don't you? Oh, but alas, it's back to reality. I'm going to give this a good coat of Debbie's DIY in the color beadboard. I'm going to let it dry and give it one more coat after that. To make sure the paint gets into all the nooks and crannies, I'm using a small pointed brush. I made sure to cover every surface of that frame so that it wouldn't have any gold showing until I did the next technique. At this point, I decided I wanted the frame to look even older, so I got out my little mallet and my screwdriver and just started making some notches here and there. I also took out just a couple of little chunks of mold. Now, I could have done this earlier, probably should have done this earlier, because that way I wouldn't have to add more paint. But that's okay because that's why you have me. See, this way I can make all the mistakes for you and warn you about them ahead of time so you don't have to do it yourself. You're welcome. Don't forget though, if you do make mistakes, that just means you're closer to getting where you want to be and you're closer to getting that object that brings you joy and makes your heart happy. When I'm doing this, I'm thinking back to the times that I've thrifted old frames and some of the molding is gone. That's the look I'm trying to achieve. Let the wet distressing commence. Now, if y'all haven't done this yet, you are missing out. It is so easy and it gets such a great look. You simply take a damp cloth or a wet wipe and you start wiping off the paint. This paint is water soluble, so it wipes off really easy. And it only takes paint off of the peaks and not the valleys. And that's a good thing, since before, when I took out those little notches and made new cracks, I didn't add more gold paint and then add DIY. I just did the DIY paint. So whatever's underneath the DIY paint that's sealed, that's what's going to show. Because Debbie's DIY paint is water soluble, it has to be sealed. I like to use this spray when I'm making something with deep molds because it gets into the nooks and crannies easier. A variety of craft stores sell pre-made lavender wreaths. In fact, later in this video, I'll be using one that I bought at Hobby Lobby, but I want to show you how to make some super cheap. So I bought 2 stems of lavender at Dollar Tree, and there's a lot of different varieties out there, and you can find cheap ones also at Family Dollar and Dollar General. Right now I'm cutting some small gauge floral wire. It's just about 1.5 inch long pieces. Once again, while I'm editing, I think I wasted so much time using these cutters, and I should have been using that fencing plier tool because it's way easier to cut, and I will show you that later in the video. To make a wreath, we first start by connecting all of the stems together to make one long swag. I do that by putting them together in 3 places. I start with the middle, so I lay down one stem on another stem about 1/3 away from the top. And usually I start with the heaviest part of the top stem, so I start with the middle place where I'm attaching them. I take one of those little pieces of wire and I bend it over like a horseshoe or a bobby pin, and I put it through the leaves and the floral so that it's mostly around just the plastic part or the metal part of the stem. I don't want it to have that flower stuck down in there. And then I turn it over and I twist it and I twist it and I twist it with my pliers, and I cut that off, and then I tuck it in so that when people are handling it, they won't get poked by it. Then I go up to the top and I attach the top piece, and I again try to move away the floral. You want to move away the floral so that when it comes back naturally, it covers up that wire from the top view. Then I go back down to the bottom, and I don't know why I do it in this order. It's just easiest, I guess, because I like to get the bulk part of it connected first. Once I get the first one done, then I just start attaching the top to the next one. And you know what I'm saying? Gosh, I hope you guys understand this because I've tried to record it like 5 times and I'm going to lose my voice before the rest of the video. Oh boy. Remember, I'm not the math girl, so I don't know how to measure this. I just keep pushing it around and making sure it's big enough or not. And if it's not, I keep going. I want it to be big enough that it goes over the sides of the frame just a little bit, but not so big that it covers up the sides of the frame. Also, make sure you attach the wires so that they always twist in the back. When I have enough stems connected that it is the right size, I go ahead and get more of those little wires and attach the ends together, and I do it the same way. I attach it in several different places just to make sure it's secure. I like to have enough floral left at the end that I can take the flowers off and glue them into the places that look sparse. When it has the right amount of floof, I'm done and I'm ready to start gathering everything together I think would look pretty in a bow for this wreath. The bow I'm making is super easy. I learned it from my friend Sabrina at Sabrina's Craft Nanigans. Y'all should go watch her. She is so much fun. See this lace? If you have regular lace that's gathered on one side, you can just cut off the part where they gathered it and pull it out, and voila, you got a new piece of flat lace. So you start by layering everything together you think will look pretty for your bow, and then you grab the whole bunch and you tie it up with a string or a wire. There's no loops in this bow, so it makes it really easy to handle. I take that same wire or string I tied the bow together with and I wrap it around the wreath and connect it on the back. Now make sure you pull back your floral so that you won't mush it down, and when it lays back down it will cover up the wire or the string you tied it onto the wreath with. And then you floof it up. Do a lot of floofing. Make sure all the pieces go the directions you want them to go, and sometimes they'll be folded over the other side, so just pull them back where they belong and make it look all pretty. Next, you need to find a wide ribbon to connect the wreath to the frame. So I took a piece of that lace, I took the gathered side off, and I laid one piece down, put a strip of glue across it, and I laid another piece on top of it. Then I cut off the excess part past the glue, and I opened it up and laid it back down and put glue across the seam and added a pretty green ribbon. You want to make sure this is long enough so that it can overlap when you attach your wreath to the frame. By the way, I've made quite a few of these, and every one of them has sold out of my booth. People just love them in the spring, but I've even sold them in the winter as well. So I take the ribbon that I made the bow out of and I kind of flatten it down, and then I add the piece that's going to connect the wreath to the frame. And I just make sure it's all smooth, and then I figure out how far down I want it hanging on the frame. Have extra ribbon. It's better to have some you have to cut off than not have enough. I turn it over and pull the ribbon up, and I glue part of it down to the back side of the frame, and then I pull the other part of the ribbon over that and I connect that together. And I push down on it really hard. I got out one of those little thingies you put on the end of your finger so you won't burn yourself, and I just mushed and mushed and mushed. You can add another ribbon. I've done that so that it goes up and I can hang that on a nail. But this frame had that wire on it and I was able to leave it on it while I worked on it. So I didn't have to add a hanger, but this is the time to do that. And then I went along the sides of the wreath and just pulled out some of the lavender so that it was just laying over the top of the frame. And I have glued those pieces down on other ones that I've made. I didn't need to on this one. I arranged my bow and that was it. I was done. So what do you think? Isn't this sweet? Project number 2. When I went to Hobby Lobby for a lavender wreath, I found this cute little wedding decor in the clearance section, and that only cost $2.24. I had a little plate that fit just perfectly on it, and on the back of the plate, I attached one of these hooks I found at Amazon. I put it right in the middle because that's where it needed to be to attach it to the misses. I used wire to make sure it really stuck, but you know what? When I got done with this, I put some hot glue on the back of the part of the plate that is higher than the rest of the plate, and I made sure it was attached to the misses, and it worked so well. I don't even know if the wire is still holding it together. I think it's just the glue. So I think that if you're going to sell something like this, you might want to double up on it and make sure it stays attached for your customer. But if it's something you're keeping for yourself, man, do the easiest way possible. And if you have some good hot glue that's going to really stick and not fall apart, go for it. Just use that. That's what I would do if it was for me. When I first started crafting to make things to sell in my booth, I bought some rub-on transfers on Amazon, and when I got them, I thought these aren't what I was thinking they were. They're more like rub-on vinyl stickers, and that's fine. I mean, they're shiny and they are relieved more from the plate. They're not really smooth. So just be aware if you buy something like that. Read the reviews and make sure you know what you're getting. But you do apply them just like you apply a rub-on transfer. And you guys, they're really cute. I mean, they're bunnies with lavender, right? So they had a few other pictures in the same set. And I just cut off a little piece of fence and some more lavender, and I layered it until I thought it looked good. By the way, I took it off of the Mrs. frame while I was doing this because it made it so much easier to work with. When I was done and it was super cute, I went ahead and started layering together the ribbon I was going to use to make the bow for this project. And I put the piece of string down that I tied it with first so that it was super easy to just gather it up and tie that in a little knot. Then I used some of my deep purple velvet ribbon and made a little bow, and I just cut the edges so that they were at an angle, and that will keep the ribbon from fraying. I did not cut off the ends of the little piece of twine I used to tie the bow in the first place. I left that long enough to attach the entire wreath and the bow to the little Mrs. frame. All I did was go underneath some of the lavender again so it wouldn't be smushed, and I tied a square knot left over right, right over left on the back. And I did have to redo that part because I tied it too close to the frame and it didn't hang over the front of the plate. But once I fixed it, I was done. And you guys, this was super easy. It only took about a half an hour. Look how cute this turned out. Project number 3. This clock is one of the items I got when I made the video called Best Haul Ever, and I probably ended up paying about a quarter for it when everything was said and done. I got out my Brillo pad and cleaned up the sides, and then to clean the glass, I used my Sprayway glass cleaner that I buy on Amazon. I use less of this than other sprays, and when I use it, I don't have to use Goo Gone or any oils to remove the stickers. I just use a little bit of elbow grease and it comes right off. And this makes the glass super, super shiny and streak free. I'll leave a link for it in the description. Anything you buy from Amazon by using one of my links to get there, I'll get a small compensation from Amazon, but it won't raise your price. I disassembled everything by first removing the rim that's holding the glass on, and then I started taking apart the clock pieces. These kinds of clocks are often made different, so it depends on how they're made as how you take it apart. There's a nut on this one that's underneath the hands of the clock, and I had to loosen that all the way first. And then I just removed the nut bolt at the very top that was holding everything together. When I had it all the way apart, I went ahead and reassembled it. I'm not going to reuse it in this project, but I wanted to make sure I didn't lose anything. And sometimes I forget what order the pieces go in. So it's really helpful to me if I put it back together as soon as I take it apart and get it removed from the clock. I started peeling up the clock face and realized it didn't have a flat surface under it. It was a big empty space. So I pushed it back down along the edge and I got out my decoupage paper. This is from Recycled and it looks like painted burlap. It is so pretty. I laid it in the area where the clock face is, and then I used my finger to just trace around the edge. And I cut outside of that so that I would have a little bit of overlap. I would rather have too much paper I have to cut down further than have not enough paper because you can't add back to it. At this point, I realized I needed to remove the clock face so I could attach the decoupage paper right to it, and I would be able to get a good trim around the edges. So I decided to put it on the back of the clock face because then I wouldn't have to paint the clock face. You know, when you use decoupage paper, whatever you're decoupaging on can come through. So it's a good idea to paint whatever you're working on before you add the paper. I first stuck it down just to the pieces of like tapey glue stuff that were keeping the clock face on the actual clock, just so I could get it cut around the edges. Before I did that, I made sure it wouldn't get stuck and tear when I tried to take it off. And then I got out my Debbie's DIY liquid patina in the color Crystal Clear Chandelier. And after I pulled the decoupage paper back off the back of the clock face, I gave it a good coat of that. I folded my decoupage paper in half and put it on. Oh, and it's wet. I got the decoupage paper wet. I folded it in half and put it on one side of the back of the clock face, and I smoothed it out a little bit, and then I folded the other side back, and that made it so that it was really easy to get the wrinkles out. And then I gave it another good coat of the liquid patina over the top. I like this a lot better than Mod Podge. Next, we're working on the frame, and we're going to start by sealing it with either Salvation Solution or shellac. I used shellac because it was easier to spray on the curved surface. Then I'm using Debbie's Design Diary DIY paint in the color Beadboard, and I'm mixing it with this sand finish paint additive I got in the best haul ever. It was about a quarter again. When I got it to the consistency I wanted, I just put it right on and I gave it two coats. Now, sometimes when I'm using a paint additive, I'll only use one coat of the paint mixture with that. And then on top of that, I'll just fill it in with regular paint and no additive. But I wanted this one to have a lot of sand in it, so I went ahead and gave it two coats. I'm doing this part especially for the viewer in my last comment section that said I was messy. Well, yeah, I'm messy, but I mean, I try to be kind and creative. So there's that. I'm stretching right there because I'm using my little cloth to also do my PT at the same time. Now I'm going to wet distress, and it takes a little bit more elbow grease with something that has a paint additive in it because it you don't want to like spread out your distressing. You want to go concentrate in just one small area because if you spread out, you'll just rub off a lot of the sand and leave the paint, and it will have a smooth surface and no distressing. So I really concentrate in on one area at a time with my cloth, and I go all the way around, and I added quite a bit of distressing to this because I thought it looked so pretty that way. And I was right. When I was done, I went ahead and sprayed it with my Rust-Oleum matte spray sealer that's clear. Oh, before I did that, I wiped it off with the towel. You do that so that when you wet distress, sometimes the part where the paint comes off will leave a little smear of paint, and you just want to rub that off. So after I was done, I gave it a good swipe with my towel. I spray painted the ring that goes around the glass with gold metallic Rust-Oleum spray paint, and I let it dry, and then I gave it another coat. I love the metallic kind because it just makes it so shiny and pretty. I used Gorilla Glue extra strong adhesive spray to attach the clock face back into the clock. And I also added just a little bit of hot glue all the way around the edges just to make sure it stayed in place while the other glue was drying. And now I'm making a wreath. I found this swag at Bin Time. It's an Amazon return store, and I got it on 75-cent day. Always make sure you open the boxes in those places. And now for the tool of glory. I'm going to try to explain how this works. See that little notch on the side? There's two of those. They're different sizes. When you put your wire in, you feel like it's going to move because it goes wonky, and then boom. You barely even squeeze together those pliers, and it just cuts it right off. Even a big size or a big gauge of wire like the kind you would use on a fence. I mean, it's called fencing pliers, and it's amazing. Funny thing is, I didn't even use these white flowers in my wreath, but these were the only ones I had video of using the multi-tool. So here are all the flowers I cut for this wreath. I have some wire wreath frames, and I also had a grapevine wreath, and I thought the grapevine looked better in the clock, and plus it's easier to work with. And I don't know if you can tell, I'm in the house working at the couch because I just didn't feel so good after that procedure. And I sat in the house and watched a little bit of TV with my sweet husband while I made this wreath. I started with the eucalyptus leaves and they were in sets of three. So I put the center where they all connected down first. And then I went all the way around with those. And I put a little bit of glue under the leaves if I wanted them to lay down. A couple of them I left just sticking out or sticking up. So when I put the lavender on, I put the stem down and I added some extra glue and just pushed it all the way. I didn't put a lot under the flowers because I wanted them to kind of pop up a little bit more. I held it until it was dry, and I did this all the way around, and I put the top of the next piece of lavender where the floral is on top of the stem so you couldn't see the stem. And when I got to the very last piece, I just lifted up the flower of the first one I did and tucked a stem under it, and then I laid the flower on top of the other one. In some places the flowers did need to be glued down a little, but that was okay. Just added a little bit in there. Then I went through and found those eucalyptus leaves that I think they're both eucalyptus leaves. Forgive me if I'm wrong. I'm not really a florist. And I just kind of added those in, sticking out here and there and everywhere. I used some of my small green velvet ribbon to wrap around the wreath, and to find out where I want it, I got it to the right extension. You know what I mean? I made it the right length, and I turned the whole thing over so that the wreath didn't move. And I just put glue on the back of the clock and pushed the ribbon down really good. Make sure you have glue that's not cheap. You want to use a little bit better glue that won't come undone. And I feel pretty secure about this staying secure. I used one of my transfer sticks to really push it down and make sure that glue was super stuck. Earlier in one of the other projects, I made this fantastic bow. I mean, it's really super pretty. And when I put it on this wreath, I just didn't like it. I liked the wreath all alone with that little bit of green ribbon showing. So here it is without the bow, and here it is with. The bow is really pretty. I have nothing against the bow. It's just not the look I was going for. So I probably should have showed you how to make the bow, but you know what? It's the same one I made before. I just add some floral to the top. Isn't that fun with that piece of burlap kind of all scraggly? I just love these bows. Thank you, Sabrina, for teaching me that. So here is the entire finished clock frame wreath. So did y'all have a favorite? This time I'm picking the clock, and I think the reason is partly because it was unexpected. I had bought a frame at the thrift store that already had molds on it, so I could show you the difference between making one with a homemade wreath and adding molds to the frame, and then making one with a bought wreath with molds already on the frame. And I used the frame for something else, so I had to find something to put my third wreath in, and that clock was perfect. I love how it turned out. Well, I really do appreciate you guys being here once again. I love when you make comments on my videos, and all the subscribers that are new are kind of blowing me away. I'm really blessed, and I appreciate you guys. So thank you so much for that. Until you see me next time, I hope you have a wonderful week. And as always, I hope you are blessed. Bye.